Hey guys, I've decided to start a new series on the channel called Worth a Look, where we'll be covering games that I've been spending a lot of time with personally that you might enjoy as well. With the sheer amount of games coming out for multiple systems and multiple retail services, it's genuinely hard to find something that's worth playing, especially since the gaming industry will flat out lie to make sure their product is sold, and they have no intention of giving you the best gaming experience they possibly can. I will always give my support to an artist who's passionate about what they do. The bedroom developer who'll spend hundreds of hours coding something that they feel other people will enjoy. Remember Jordan Mechner of Prince of Persia fame? His team spent months tracking down a train car from the original Orient Express, which operated as far back as 1883, to make sure he created an authentic experience with his pre-World War I adventure game, The Last Express. Yes, the game was a flop, but it's a sign of pure dedication to a product, and there needs to be more of that level of dedication in this day and age. For the purposes of being worth a look, a game should meet 3 criteria. It has to be enjoyable from start to finish without feeling like you've wasted your time. It needs to be challenging with rewards appropriate to the challenge, and the price of the game should reflect the value of the content. With that said, let's have a look at Medieval Dynasty. Developed by RenderCube Games and published by Toplitz Productions Gumba, you play as a young man called Rasimir whose simple life as a farmer is turned upside down when his home is attacked by a neighbouring army and is forced to flee to a land owned by his uncle, a prosperous merchant. When he arrives, he learns his uncle was killed in a bandit raid, but has left stipulations in his will that his family can build wherever they want to on his lands. Armed with nothing but some food and the clothes on his back, he sets about starting his own village to carry on his uncle's dynasty. The game is like the From the Ashes DLC from Kingdom Come Deliverance, except you have full control over building the village from scratch and managing the resources required to survive. You also need to keep your villagers happy and generate income to pay your taxes each year. You start with the knowledge to create simple tools and build basic buildings like houses and storage areas for your materials, which is a big advantage compared to Henry of Skalitz from Kingdom Come. He starts as a blacksmith's apprentice and he somehow can't make tools on his own. Hell, he can't even read starting out. It also throws in some elements of Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley, where you play over the course of a number of years with 4 seasons for each year. The twist on that is that each season takes place over the course of only 3 days, taking about half an hour for each day. You'll be pretty busy starting out as there is plenty to do in the world, with every action giving you the resources and skills you need to create better buildings and crafting recipes. The skills come in 6 different groups. Extraction improves by chopping trees, digging for clay, clearing land by digging up tree stumps,
Yes! Toughest! Woo!
and mining for stone and iron. Crafting improves mainly by making tools, sewing together clothing, and cooking food. Everything you can make can either be used by the village or sold off to neighbouring villages for money. Farming pertains to the sowing and harvesting of your crops, and raising livestock when you can eventually afford it. It also involves the processing of your farmed materials, like making fertilizer for future crops with manure from your pigs or rotting food, and threshing your grain-based crops, which involves beating them with a stick to knock the grain from the stems. Yes, it's about as exciting as it sounds. You might want to delegate this job to someone else. You might want to delegate all of your farming to other people, as the most successful farmer is usually the one that's the least covered in shit. Survival improves by foraging for building materials and food in the forest, which unlocks the ability to activate an inspection mode that lets you see nearby items through the camouflage on the ground. If you happen to get lost in the forest during the night and can't get back to a bed to sleep, you can build a campfire and sleep at it. Pig! 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 Well, I'm not letting you go to waste, bud. And that brings us to the best skill, hunting. You start by carving spears out of wood, which are heavy, break easily, take at least 3 or 4 to kill a deer if you can't get a headshot, and your shots will whiff all the damn time, despite Rasimir having the throwing strength of a Greek god. Thankfully, when your skill improves, you can craft 3 different types of bow, and eventually a crossbow. It has a much longer range, great damage, and doesn't drain your stamina while you aim a shot, but my god is the reload time abysmal. It takes at least 4 seconds to draw back the string and load a bolt, and if you put it away you have to go through the full loading animation again. Stick with your recurve bow, you can at least get off 3 or 4 shots in the same amount of time. There's plenty to hunt as well. Foxes? Don't shoot the foxes, they're so cute. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Deer, boars, wolves, bears, and rabbits.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Probably the most interesting thing to hunt is a species of European bison called a wisent, which like their western counterparts were almost hunted to extinction back in the day. I mean, it's 600 kilos of meat and fur, why wouldn't you? I even had a moment while I was pulling footage for this video where I fought off 3 wolves to get to one, and I ended up breaking my bow and had to finish it off with my axe. I'm a growing boy, I can't live off mushrooms my whole life. And speaking of life, we finally get to the last skill, diplomacy. It plays like the conversation system in The Sims, where a topic can positively or negatively influence the mood of a person towards you. It's also the most important skill, as it's required to convince people to live and work in your village, and also to woo a young lady into becoming your wife and eventually having a baby. Because acquiring a lot of stuff and passing it on to your children is the whole point of creating a dynasty, isn't it? Now to my favourite part of the game, managing your village. I was a massive fan of the Settlers 2 back when I was a kid, and I was always fascinated with watching the little guys scurry about like ants, collecting one resource and delivering it to another building to make it into a more valuable resource, like a little assembly line. I also love Factorio for the same reason, but you really need to have a degree in business management to do well in that game. Thankfully, Medieval Dynasty keeps things at a much simpler level. Once you establish a big enough village, you can automate the crafting of almost any item in the game. An example is you start by having your barn workers plant a field of wheat, harvest it, thresh it to separate the grain, pass it on to your villager in the sewing room who will use the straw to weave hats, and either replant the grain to make more wheat, or grind it into flour so your innkeepers in the tavern can make bread. Every villager has a level in each of the previously mentioned skills, which affects the speed at which they can collect resources or craft. You can also delegate the percentage of their time to spend collecting or crafting each item. Checking up on your setup every season is a good idea, as the female villagers will actually leave their job to do something else with their time. Thankfully, it's the Middle Ages and OnlyFans doesn't exist yet. When you house your villagers, there needs to be a male and female in each house, and we all know what men and women get up to in the privacy of their own home, besides arguing. So the women will spend at least 2 years of game time having a baby and raising it to a toddler, where they'll then go back to work and leave them out the front to fend for themselves like a bunch of baby Yodas. I actually had issues finding a wife for myself the last time I played, as they'd always be too busy taking care of their imaginary babies. I'm presuming they can work at the village when they come of age at 18, but I'm not sure as I've only played up to year 10 in the game, which took me at least 40 hours of real game time. I came to this conclusion because the other villagers have teenage children which you can recruit when they turn 18. The issue with creating your village is that there is a limit on the number of buildings you can have up at one time, and you need to balance having enough houses for your villagers with places where they can work. To increase your building limit, you need to earn reputation, which is gained by helping out people in the neighbouring villages. You can get main story quests, and the biggest reputation dump comes from Unigost, the alderman of the village next door, who looks a lot like Swedish actor Peter Stormare. Make sure you clean that wood chipper when you're done, Pete. There's also a young man named Alwyn who dreams of giving up his dreary farm life to become a hunter. Try getting on my level, Alwyn. I killed a wisent with a rock tied to a stick. Lastly, there'll be a few people each season who will ask you to cull some dangerous animals, head to another village to buy a new pair of shoes, or collect a few items that they're short on. It's great when they ask for items that you're currently producing in the village, as you can just mosey over to your item storage and dig it out for them. It pays to do these quests as it becomes much harder to recruit villagers later on. I also wanted to touch on some of the negative aspects of the game, as there is still a little bit of jank that mars the experience for me. It's definitely not something I want to focus on for these reviews, as there's so many positive things in this game that offset the minor bugs. People end up stuck in weird positions, like on top of their roof or just floating in the air. And there's a few clipping issues here and there. The harvest is near, Sandals. Be prepared for the coming harvest. Whee! And some of the quests are broken and can't be completed. I will give RenderCube credit and say that most of the quest breaking bugs got patched really quickly, and patches are usually out within the space of a month. They add a lot of fixes and new content with each update, with the most recent being horsies. They get stuck on things fairly often at the moment, but it's a great way to get to villages much more quickly, and they can carry a lot of extra weight with some saddlebag upgrades. The last point that I wanted to cover for this review is that as of December 2020, this game is still in the alpha phase of early access. I haven't been impressed with that level of polish and content in a game since Minecraft. Overall, if you're looking for a Stardew Valley Harvest Moon fix, or if you wanted to be a farmer in Kingdom Come Deliverance instead of a squire, this is your game. As you can see by my GOG Galaxy profile, I've spent a lot of time playing this game, and I intend to spend a lot more, especially when multiplayer eventually gets implemented. The game meets the 3 criteria I mentioned at the start of the video, although it does fall short on the third one a little bit. The game was $32 dues when I first bought it on special, and I get a little bit annoyed at paying more than $20 for a game, but considering the amount of enjoyable content that's in the game already, and the content that's coming further down the line, in my book, it's worth a look. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll be finding out what men and women do with their hard-earned money.